Hello guys, here are some interesting news you may like.
The European Union and Vietnam is signing a free trade agreement. Vietnam and the European Union signed a free trade and investment protection agreement today in Hanoi during ceremony attended by European Trade Commissioner Cecilia Malmström and Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc. The trade pact includes provisions on intellectual property protection and investment liberalization. The trade deal and the investment protection agreement still must be approved by the European Parliament and Vietnam's National Assembly. The long, slow death of Venice. The local population is at its lowest since the 1950s, with no turnaround in sight as tourists continue to chase locals out. If you've been to Venice, you get it. Even the most jaded globetrotter can't help but to a double take at the sheer originality and beauty of the centuries-old city built entirely on water. Yet even the quickest visit reveals that Venice is no longer a living city, with scores more tourists than actual Venetians crowding its lagoon, bridges and walkways. The numbers bear that out. The city's population basically peaked in the 1500s and thought it rallied again to near a 16th century level in the 1970s. Today there are just 1/3 as many Venetians as 50 years ago. Once the Mediterranean's paramount city-state, Venice today seems powerless to arrest the trend of ever more tourists and ever fewer residents. When a mammoth cruise ship rammed into a boat packed with tourists earlier this month, leaving 4 injured, civic associations and then a dwindling number of Venetians were quick to remind that they have been saying for years the lagoon is too small and too crowded to accommodate the jumbo cruise ships that appear daily in high seasons. But Venice can't stop. More museums than modern city. It's addicted to the cash the tourist horde bring in. The tradition industries like chemicals and steel are disappearing, and Italy's development ministry has even declared the region as an industrial crisis. With little left beyond tourism, the city known as the Serenissima appears to have little choice. The accident was a direct consequence of years of choices in the name of money, said Claudio Vernier. Some other news, how the climate change is viewed around the world. There are wildfires in California and Siberia, floods wiping out the grain harvests in Argentina, drought forcing water restrictions in Cape Town and affecting shipping on Germany Rhine River. Climate change is global in nature and is creeping higher in service of voters' concerns. In some countries it's at near the top, but it's not regarded with the same urgency the world over. A Bloomberg collation of polls reveals some glaring disparities in the way the emerging crisis is viewed against other worries like job security. How is it looking in Europe? An extended dry spell across northern Europe last summer brought record temperatures from the UK to Finland, and this year already threatens a repeat. The European Drought Observatory reports that September 2018 the crops were damaged and the livestock sector was under pressure, while logistics suffered a significant disruption and the rising transportation costs due to impact on waterways. Here is the polls show citizens are increasingly concerned about the importance of climate change in the environment. How is it in the United Kingdom? In Brexit-dominated Britain, the environment was tied with the economy for fourth most important issue in a YouGov poll of voters at the end of April. That's up from 9th a year ago. The top 3 issues were Brexit, health and crime. How is it in Russia? Thousands were killed in a Siberia wildfire in April and May that melted permafrost across huge areas of northern Russia, but none of it resonated much with voters in the main population centers. Ecology and environment placed 15th place on a list of voters' concerns in May of 19 poll conducted by the Russian Public Opinion Foundation, down from shared 11th place in January. The top concerns were utility bills, inflation and wages. That said, awareness awareness of the environment more generally, usually taken to mean air and water pollution in Russia, is growing, albeit slowly, with 10% of respondents citing it's a major concern, up from 6% in 2016. How is it in Norway? One of the world's largest oil and gas producers, Norway basks in a relatively pristine environmental and leads the world in electric vehicles per inhabitant, but in political terms, caring for environment comes relatively low on the scale of voters' concerns, with just 17% citing it is a top issue, below education, at 28%, health 26%, care of the elderly 22%, and social differences 18%. In the capital Norway, however, voters cite the environment as a second only to education at 29%. How is it in North America? United States. Donald Trump has made the help for the coal industry and cutting back the environmental protection in a cornerstone of his presidency, and pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Accords. Here is the American climate divide. The gulf between Republicans and Democrats is clearly visible. Also, the black shows they're very concerned and so on. How is it in Canada? The climate change is set up to be a central issue in the fall election, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's carbon tax helping determine whether he wins a second term. Consequently, climate change ranks relatively high on the poll of voters' concerns, according to Abacus data, which found that 74% said it was a very big or moderately big problem in November. That was still behind issues including drug addiction, wages, and the gap between rich and poor. The top concern was affordability of housing this month. Unseasonally early wildfires in the oil production state of Alberta forced evacuations and cut in oil outputs. How is it in Latin America? In Argentina, voters prioritize focus on consumer prices, increase higher taxations, corruption, and unemployment, according to a May poll by Sao Paulo based in Atlas Politico, Climate in Future. Argentine farmers have been some of the first to feel the effects of climate change, with floods wiping out the grains as rainfall in the Pampas exceeded the 50-year average in the 5 of the past 6 years. How is it in Mexico? A parametric poll from July 2018 showed corruption followed by crime, and then the economy is a key issue that prompted voters to elect President Andrés Manuel López Obrador in office. He has pledged a little on climate but did halt fracking for shale. Then he broke ground on a new gasoline refinery, while putting auctions for renewable energy production contracts on hold. Meanwhile, fires near Mexico City worsen the air quality in a city already plagued by smog. In May, schools were closed for a day because the air quality was hazardous. How is it in Brazil? With massive deforestation of the Amazon, the epic floods and drought hitting its west, agriculture and energy supply. Water supplies in Brasilia were restricted for 2 days a week last summer. Brazil may be one of the countries where climate issues are most visible, yet it is rarely a central debate in elections or a top concern in voters' surveys. President Jair Bolsonaro makes no secret of his intention to exploit resources rather than preserve them. In December 2018, unemployment, corruption, and health and public security topped the list of voters' concerns. Only 1% of these polls cited the environment as a main concern. How is it in Asia? Here you can see a picture of the toxic air estimated to kill more than 1 million Indians each year, according to the non-profit Health Effect Institute. And how is it in Japan? Last month, Hokkaido had the hottest temperature ever recorded for May in Japan. Pollsters do not, as a rule, ask about climate change in monthly survey, and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe rarely addresses it in speeches. Some polling suggests concerns over the issue has fallen since a peak in 2017. However, asked what the government should prioritize in terms of scientific research, 66% responded to a general survey conducted by the Nikkei, placed energy and environment second after health. All parties have environmental policies in their manifestos, with agreement on 80% cut in greenhouse gases by 2015. How is it in India? The environment is creeping up the scale of issues for voters in the world's driest inhabited continent, but it is still just outside the top 5 concerns. The Ipsos Issues Monitor placed it in its 6th in its March report, with 21% of respondents identifying as major concern, compared with 10% in 2015. The top 5 issues were the cost of living, healthcare, climate, economy, and immigration. Still, a separate Lobby Institute survey released this week found that Australians see climate change as the number 1 critical threat, ahead of cyber attacks and North Korea's nuclear program. Energy and environment was a key dividing line in the May election, with the voters unexpectedly backing Scott Morrison's conservative pro-mining government. How is in South Korea? Perhaps unsurprisingly, relations with North Korea are the top concern in Seoul. A weekly Gallup poll for May the 31st found that other main reasons for approval or disapproval of President Moon Jae-in to be his diplomacy, anti-corruption drive, welfare economy, and employment matters. Climate change didn't feature, despite that was probably the biggest wildfire in South Korea's history, raging the same month. Concerns have also risen in the recent years over dangerous levels of high dust pollution, prompting the army to be drafted in to monitor the phenomenon. How is it in Indonesia? The world's largest island nation views with Australia as the world's largest coal exporter. It's also the biggest producer of palm oil. Pact is only achievable through unbridled deforestation and the expansion of plantations. While the pre-election were largely fought on the bread and butter issues like unemployment, inflation, and wealth distribution, along with the divisive religious identity politics. The government is not immune to climate matters. The capital, Jakarta, is sinking due to rising sea level, and international pressure is forcing a move towards a less damaging biodiesel program for palm oil. Here is the Indonesian orangutans are on the verge of extinction as a result of poaching and deforestation. The country has cleared thousands of square miles of peatlands for palm oil plantations. Was it in China? Granted, the world's most population nation doesn't hold election, but that doesn't mean it's immune to the impact of man-made climate change. The Communist Party sought to curb coal-burning power stations to improve air quality, and President Xi Jinping signed up to the Paris Climate Accords. A November 2017 survey, Climate Change in the Chinese Mind, found a high level of awareness of climate change and concludes that 90% of those surveyed supported implementation of the Paris Agreement. How was it in the Middle East? Turkey. Freak storm ravaged Istanbul 2 years ago, but voters have other concerns. They regard unemployment, the cost of living, and the depreciation of the Turkish lira as the most significant problems facing the country, according to social and political trends in Turkey. Survey conducted by Hadir Has University. Terrorism, an ever-present threat, has receded in recent months. Climate and the environment didn't feature in January survey. How is it in Israel? Climate concerns are not on the Israel voters' radar, even after a 5-year drought sent the amount of rain reaching natural water sources to its lowest level in about a century and accelerated the shrinkage of the Dead Sea. In the May survey, the Israel Democracy Institute Research Center found only 2.5% of the Jewish Israelis and 6.9% of Israel Arabs said the environment shall be a top issue discussed in coalition agreements. Defense and socioeconomic matters top the list of priorities as income inequities fester and security threats leave the country's northern and southern border. How is it in Africa? Nigeria climate concerns are almost absent from Nigeria voters, despite desertifications in the country northeast and the shrinking of the Lake Chad basin to the behind of the southern migration of herdsmen, leading to violent clashes with farmers. None of the major political parties had had it in their manifestos or even mentioned it during February's elections. Education, security, and electricity were the top 3 concerns for Nigerian voters going into the election, followed by improving the economy, agriculture, and jobs. South Africa. In a country with a jobless rate approaching 28% in March, voters consistently placed jobs and unemployment at the top of their concerns. In the 3 polls by South African Institute of Race Relations from September 2018 to April 2019, corruption came next, followed by basic services like electrical and water, crime and insecurity, education and housing. In the last of 13 key concerns, ranging from the drug abuse to racism, climate in future. That's despite a water crisis that peaked in mid-2017 to mid-2018 and brought Cape Town to the brink of becoming the first major city in the world to run out of water.
Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video and subscribe. See you.